Hey there, Alex Kidman here. This is the HMD Pulse Pro. Let's get into the review. So the big thing for the HMD Pulse Pro is that it's HMD Pulse Pro. It's not a Nokia Pulse Pro. Because if you were not aware, HMD has held the license to produce Nokia phones for the past few years, 8 years or so. And so if you bought a Nokia Android phone in that time space, it was actually an HMD phone. And what they've decided to do is instead strike out with their own HMD branded devices. Nokia's more going to be in your kind of feature phone, digital detox phone, and that weird Barbie phone they've got coming up. HMD is going to be the brand you will see for their Android devices, and the Pulse Pro is sort of the flagship of their new range. Although flagship suggests it's going to be a $1,000 phone or something, it's not. It's a $299 Australian phone, so it's still firmly within that budget space. It's built around a 6.56-inch 90Hz LCD display with a resolution of 1612 by 720 pixels, which means it's an effective 720p display. 720p is not super sharp for a $299 phone, I've got to say, and it's also not super bright. With 480 nits of brightness, in direct sunlight, this can be a slightly tougher phone to look at and to make out detail on than many of its competitors. While the design style still speaks to that kind of Nokia-esque design language, this isn't a badly designed phone for sure, there are a couple of little things that irk me, and they are very minor, very minor niggles. We flip up to the base here, we have USB-C for power and a headphone jack. Headphone jack's never a bad thing to see, but why is it not in the center there? That just bugs me. They're tiny little design ideas, but they're things that just don't quite look right to my eye. And when we're talking about design, things should look right by and large. In control terms, you've got your near standard combo these days of a thin power button that's also a fingerprint reader. Works reasonably enough, not super fast, but it works. And volume controls on the right-hand side. And then on the left, we've got your SIM card tray plus micro SD, up to 256 gig of micro SD expansion. Always, again, nice to see. In color terms, the HMD Pulse Pro comes in Glacier Green, Black Ocean, and Twilight Purple. No prizes for guessing which color they've sent me. Twilight Purple's fine. It's very similar, I find, to what Samsung calls lilac. It's kind of purpley color with this slight metallic sheen. As you can see, it loves to pick up fingerprints. This thing looks like a crime scene, and I've only been handling it for a couple of minutes. And it's very plasticky, but it's a $299 phone. What are you going to do, really? The big story here, though, the big interesting thing here is that the HMD Pulse Pro is repairable. Now, every phone is repairable, technically speaking, but HMD actively wants you to be able to do that, and that's different because lots of manufacturers don't want you to do that or only want you to do that through their authorized service agents. HMD's partnered with iFixit for this. They've been doing this for a while for some of their Nokia phones, providing tools and guides. I'll provide a link to the guide for the Pulse Pro in the description below if you're keen. And the idea here is that down the track, something goes wrong, and if you don't have access to a mobile phone repair place, or if you just want to have a go at it yourself, you absolutely can do that. They'll provide you with a guide on how to replace things like the screen if that happens to break and you need to replace it. I love this. I love this in theory. There are some caveats here. My prior experience with trying to do a repair, and they didn't send me a repair kit or a spare phone or parts, so I haven't even tried with this one, but my prior experience, it didn't end well. I'll link the video there so you can see what happened. But there is some risk involved. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, hang on, Alex, I just never want to repair a phone myself. That's just not what I do. Why would I care about that? How is that important to me? Well, the important thing here is not just that if you're a keen techie consumer that you can do it, but that it can be done. Because if those parts are available, if those guides are available, you can go down to those little mobile phone repair kiosks that are in every shopping mall everywhere across the planet, and they'll be able to order those parts. They'll be able to see those guides. They'll be able to cleanly and quickly and hopefully slightly more cheaply do those repairs because they're not kind of mucking around guessing at how things are done or just heating stuff up to melt glue or whatever. It's all designed to be repairable from the get-go, and I really do like and appreciate that. I think it's a big plus. It's a big vote of confidence, not just in kind of environmental sustainability grounds, but in terms of saying, hey, here's a phone we want you to use for a good long time. The thing with the HMD Pulse Pro, though, is almost everything else is, well, it's kind of average, and that gives me pause for thought on that repairability thing. I'll come back to that right at the end, but first of all, let's talk about the cameras. So for most phones in the budget space, I can tell you what the cameras are going to be. You'll have a higher megapixel primary wide camera, maybe an ultra wide, and probably a 2 megapixel macro, because 2 megapixel macros infest budget phones like a virus, and they're all pretty awful. And that's not what HMD's done here. Instead, at the rear, you get a 50 megapixel primary lens, 2 megapixel focusing lens, and at the front, a 50 megapixel selfie lens. That's different for sure, but different doesn't always mean great. And the reality here is that most of the shots you're going to take on this phone are going to be ordinary at best. So, selfies, for example, shooting with a 50 megapixel selfie camera theoretically sounds like it should be great. The results are sort of middling. So, this shot, for example, that I'm putting up now, you can see me for sure. I mean, the shot itself is fine, but I do still look rather like I've been green screened onto that train. And I promise you, I was on that train when that photo was taken. The same is true for close-up shots. Obviously, no macro lens, but they're just kind of ordinary. Ordinary daytime shots are okay without being stellar. And when it comes to zoom, all you've got is digital zoom. You get a default of 1 time, so regular shot, 2 times, or up to 6 times pinch to zoom. All digital crops, and they don't run so well. So here's a quick run through of a 1-time standard shot. Then here's the 2-time shot, which is still okay, although it's losing some detail in the darker areas of the shot. But then at 6 times, it really, really falls apart. It looks like it's been coloured in with crayons. It's a terrible, terrible photo, really. And this isn't a terrible camera, but it's just a deeply average one. And to jump ahead, actually, because I usually do this in order, to battery, it's the same story with batteries. So this has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery on it. Again, that's deeply average for non-folding phones these days. And it charges via USB-C, again, all good and standard, up to 20 watts, all good and standard, no wireless, but you wouldn't expect it at this price point. And running it through my standard YouTube battery test as best I could, I usually use a 1080p video, but of course this is only a 720p screen. It used up about 5% of its battery an hour, which again, deeply average, not bad. It does manage a day under most circumstances. You can send any phone flat within a day if you hammer it relentlessly. That's true for every phone, but in my own testing, yeah, look, this can manage a day without too much trouble. Into 2 days is entirely feasible if you're a lighter user, which a lot of budget phone users are going to be, I suspect. So that's all fine, but it's all fine but average. There's nothing standout there. But it's when we come to talk about performance that things get a little bit more complicated. The HMD Pulse Pro is built around Unisoc's T606 processor with 6 gig of RAM and 128 gig of onboard storage. And the T606 is the phone processor of choice for really budget phones, including, oddly enough, the Pulse Pro's smaller sibling, the Pulse Plus, which is a cheaper phone with the same internal processor, slightly less RAM, same processor. And the problem here is that, comparatively speaking, for $299, you can get faster, better performing phones. I'm thinking things here like the Moto G54 or the Samsung Galaxy A05s or even the Moto G24. That's a cheaper phone too. And that's kind of a problem for the HMD because whilst you can't expect super fast performance, you should at least expect decent performance, and this is below the standard set by other phones, and in some cases, it's not even close, whether you're talking CPU or GPU performance. Now, as usual, I have a full written review which has benchmark tables. These do not present well on YouTube, I find, so I'll put a link in that in the description below. Please do go read that. But the practical reality here is this is not a fast phone. This is a slowish phone. You will hit times where you're waiting for apps to load or you're waiting for things to happen. If you've got a lot of stuff going on, it can slow down quite a bit. And that is problematic for a $299 phone. If this was a $199 phone, or if it's even cheaper than that, much less of an issue, but it's not. HMD's also done something slightly odd here with the underlying launcher, which I think you can probably see. It desaturates the color of a lot of the default apps. And I guess this is just meant to be nicer to your eyes. What it does for me is it gives me pause because every time I open up a folder with all these dark icons in them, I'm left thinking, wait, is that really the one that I want to hit? No, wait, does it look like that? Because the color's gone. I'm just so used to thinking, oh, that's that color or that's that color. Your muscle memory kicks in, but it can't because it's just not there. What's particularly weird, though, is, of course, other applications aren't in grayscale. So it just looks really discordant. If I open up the app drawer, we're back in color land again. It's a really odd choice. I'm not sure it's one that I love. What I do love about the HMD Pulse Pro, though, is that, like a lot of HMD phones, there's actually a commitment to Android updates. So you get 2 years of Android OS updates, so it's on Android 14 and it should go through to Android 16, and 3 years worth of security updates, although the security updates are only delivered on a quarterly basis, which is not super fast, but hey, it's a lot better than a lot of other manufacturers are doing, a whole lot better. This is something, again, that I wish a lot of other manufacturers copied from HMD. And it is a bit of a vote in the long-term durability stakes of this phone because it's repairable and it will see future Android OS updates. However, does that mean it's a phone that you should buy? It's a tricky balancing act, really. HMD is very much sticking to what it's done best in many ways with the Pulse Pro. Whilst it is the most expensive of the HMD branded Androids here in Australia, that expensive label only really goes up as high as $299 outright, which still plants it in the budget category, of course. I do truly love HMD's commitment to repairability and making it practical and affordable for consumers to keep their phones going as long as possible. Relatively few budget makers offer up guaranteed Android updates, especially for phones based around Unisoc chipsets, so that's also really good. But I can't help be struck by the thought that this is a slow phone when it launches, when it's brand new. It's already a slow budget phone. And all the OS updates and all the repairability in the world is not going to make it faster. It's just going to mean over time it's going to be a less compelling prospect. And that makes me wonder whether or not it's going to be worthwhile repairing it. I kind of wish this was a faster, better phone. If this was a more mid-range kind of device, or if HMD started launching those, then repairability would make a lot more sense because those are phones which, again, over time, yeah, they're going to get slower. That happens. The newer ones are going to be faster. Again, that also happens. But it's going to make a lot more sense to update those phones, to repair those phones. This is a slow car, in essence, and when the only thing you can do is replace it with the same engine, I don't know if that's worthwhile. It's a balancing act you've really got to take into consideration because for this money right now, you can get faster, better performing phones. And I think, even though I do love the repairability aspect, I think that's the way I would suggest you go. Anyway, that's my take on the HMD Pulse Pro. Got any questions? Hit me up in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.
Thank you.